November 1944. A single British marksman operated in the ruins of northern France with a method so absurd that German intelligence dismissed early reports as battlefield hysteria. Officers called it impossible. Analysts labeled it propaganda. Yet every dawn brought fresh casualties, each killed by the same phantom rifleman whom no counter-sniper could locate. The Germans searched rubble, scanned rooftops, and swept forests, finding nothing. Because this marksman wasn't hiding where any trained soldier would look, his position violated every doctrine in sniper warfare, and that impossibility was precisely what made him unstoppable. 0547 hours, 18th of November 1944, outside Metz, France. The morning air carried the acrid stench of cordite and wet ash. Corporal Thomas Hargreaves, 24 years old, born in a Lancashire mill town where chimneys once darkened the sky, crouched in what remained of a stone farmhouse. Through gaps in the shattered wall, he observed German positions across 600 yards of cratered no-man's land. The temperature hovered near freezing. His breath formed small clouds that he consciously suppressed, a habit drilled through months of sniper training at Bisley Ranges, now applied to survival. The Wehrmacht held the ridge beyond with methodical efficiency. Their defensive positions demonstrated textbook military engineering. Interlocking fields of fire, prepared fallback routes, observation posts positioned at elevated strategic points. German snipers operated from these positions with lethal effectiveness, eliminating Allied forward observers with brutal consistency. In the previous 72 hours, Hargreaves's battalion had lost 9 scouts, 12 forward artillery observers, and 3 company commanders, all to precision rifle fire that struck from ranges exceeding 800 yards. The German snipers were not merely skilled, they represented a philosophical approach to warfare. Their training emphasized systematic methodology, calculated range estimation using graduated reticles, wind compensation through mathematical formulas, position selection following rigid doctrine that prioritized elevation, cover, and concealment in precisely that order. They established hides in church towers, factory rooftops, reinforced bunkers, positions that maximized height advantage and structural protection. This approach had proven devastatingly effective across every theater where Wehrmacht forces operated. But this doctrinal rigidity created a fatal blind spot. Hargreaves understood something that German training manuals never considered. Desperation breeds innovation that doctrine cannot anticipate. He had watched British tactics fail repeatedly against German precision. Conventional counter-sniper operations proved suicidal. Attempting to outshoot Germans from elevated positions resulted in quick death. Their optics were superior, their ammunition more consistent, their training more comprehensive. The mathematics of ballistic trajectories favored whoever held higher ground, and Germans always secured higher ground first. After the 9th British casualty in 3 days, Hargreaves made a decision that would have earned him a reprimand from any sniper instructor. He would abandon every principle taught at Bisley. He would not seek elevation. He would not prioritize structural cover. He would not establish a prepared hide with fallback routes. Instead, he would do something so fundamentally wrong, so tactically absurd, that German counter-snipers would never consider searching for him there. He would hide at ground level in plain sight, among the mud and rubble that both armies considered tactically worthless. The concept originated from a childhood memory. At age 12, Hargreaves had worked briefly in his father's factory, where machinery broke down with frustrating regularity. He remembered watching a maintenance engineer search frantically for a missing tool, checking toolboxes, shelves, and workbenches, while the wrench lay on the factory floor, visible to anyone who simply looked down. Nobody looked down. Everyone searched at eye level, where tools belonged. German snipers would search elevated positions because elevation was where snipers belonged. Hargreaves began testing his theory cautiously. Before dawn on 15th November, he positioned himself in a shell crater 30 yards forward of British lines. a location considered exposed and tactically indefensible. He wore no camouflage netting, employed no artificial concealment. Instead, he covered himself with mud, ash, and debris until he became indistinguishable from the crater itself. His rifle, a Lee Enfield No. 4 MKIT with a No. 32 telescopic sight, lay partially buried, only the scope and barrel exposed. At 06:23, a German officer emerged from a reinforced bunker 800 yards distant, confident that no Allied sniper could operate that morning, because counter-battery fire had suppressed forward positions overnight. Orgreaves compensated for distance and wind, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger with the steady pressure developed through 10,000 practice repetitions. The German officer collapsed. Confusion erupted in enemy positions. Wehrmacht soldiers scanned rooftops, church towers, tree lines, anywhere a proper sniper would position himself. Nobody examined the muddy ground between the lines. Nobody considered that a marksman might abandon every tactical advantage except one: the certainty of being overlooked. Over the following 72 hours, Hargreaves eliminated 14 German soldiers, including 3 counter-snipers sent specifically to locate him. Each German sniper died searching elevated positions, while Hargreaves fired from ground-level concealment that violated their training so completely they could not process its existence. By 18th of November, German commanders faced an impossible problem. Casualties were mounting, yet intelligence could not identify the shooter's location. Reports described a phantom marksman operating from nowhere. Frustrated officers dispatched their best counter-sniper teams. Men trained at Sennelager and blooded across the Eastern Front. These were not inexperienced soldiers. They were professionals who had eliminated Soviet snipers in Stalingrad's ruins. But Stalingrad's snipers had followed Soviet doctrine. Concealment in elevated rubble, prepared hides, escape routes. Hargreaves followed no doctrine. He was a Lancashire factory worker who understood that sometimes the most effective concealment is hiding where nobody believes hiding is possible. The Germans would search for 3 weeks, increasingly desperate, as their casualty count climbed beyond all reasonable explanation, because they were searching for a sniper. And Hargreaves was not behaving like a sniper, he was behaving like mud that could kill. 0534 hours, 21st November, 1944. No Man's Land, Metz sector. Rain fell in cold sheets, turning the cratered earth into a morass of freezing mud that soaked through clothing in minutes. Hargreaves lay motionless in his 4th ground-level position in 6 days, submerged in a shell hole that collected rainwater until he was partially underwater. The temperature hovered at 3 degrees Celsius. His fingers were numb. His uniform was saturated. Ice crystals formed on his rifle's metalwork. These were not conditions chosen for comfort. They were conditions German counter-snipers would dismiss as impossible for sustained operations. German doctrine taught that effective sniper operations required dry positions with structural protection from the elements. Wehrmacht training manuals specified minimum comfort thresholds because extended exposure degraded marksmanship through muscle fatigue, hypothermia, and loss of fine motor control. German snipers operated from warm bunkers, reinforced buildings, heated church towers, positions where they could maintain body temperature and weapon reliability. Hargreaves operated from mud because mud was invisible. The physical cost was brutal. After 16 hours submerged in freezing water, his body trembled uncontrollably. He could no longer feel his toes. His hands required 5 minutes of careful warming before trigger control returned. He urinated where he lay because movement meant detection. He ate cold rations that tasted like the mud that covered them. This was not warfare as taught in training manuals. This was endurance hunting applied to humans, patience measured against the enemy's inability to comprehend patient madness. But the arithmetic was undeniable. 16 hours of suffering purchased German confusion that saved British lives. By 21st November, Hargreaves had eliminated 37 German soldiers. Wehrmacht intelligence identified the pattern. casualties concentrated in a specific sector, all killed by precision rifle fire, all during morning hours when visibility improved. German commanders correctly deduced that a skilled marksman operated in the area. They responded with textbook counter-sniper doctrine. First, they intensified observation of elevated positions. German spotters with Zeiss optics watched every rooftop, every tree line, every structure tall enough to provide shooting angles. They found nothing because there was nothing elevated to find. Second, they deployed counter-sniper teams with specific instructions. Locate and eliminate the British marksman using standard search patterns. These teams systematically cleared buildings, inspected rubble piles, investigated any concealment that offered height advantage. They discovered abandoned positions, false hides prepared as decoys, but never the actual shooter because he operated below their search altitude. Third, they implemented harassment fire, saturating suspected areas with machine gun bursts and mortar rounds, intended to force the sniper into revealing movement. This tactic succeeded against conventional snipers who required escape routes and feared being pinned in prepared hides. Hargreaves simply submerged himself deeper in mud and waited. When bombardment ceased, he resumed firing. The German response escalated. By 23rd November, they committed a specialized Scharfschütze unit from 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division, 8 men trained specifically in counter-sniper operations, veterans who had eliminated partisan snipers in Ukraine. Their commander, Hauptscharführer Klaus Zimmermann, was a decorated marksman with 43 confirmed kills. He approached the problem methodically, analyzing ballistic trajectories from casualty wounds, calculating probable shooting positions using trigonometry, then directing systematic searches of every location, matching his mathematical projections. Every location was elevated. Every calculation presumed the shooter held high ground. On 24th November, Zimmermann positioned himself in a church tower with excellent observation across the sector. He carried a Karabiner 98K fitted with a ZF-41 scope and had visual coverage of 12 likely sniper positions. At 0612 hours, Hargreaves killed a German machine gunner from a position 100 yards forward of British lines, a muddy crater that Zimmermann had visually confirmed as empty because no sniper would operate from ground level in a forward position with no cover. Zimmermann watched the German soldier fall, observed the trajectory angle, calculated the shooter's position, and arrived at a conclusion that contradicted visual confirmation. His mathematics indicated the shot originated from ground level, forward of Allied lines, but that position was empty. He had verified it personally through his scope. The only explanation was that his calculations contained an error, so he recalculated and reached the same impossible conclusion. German intelligence reports from this period reveal growing frustration. One report, dated 25th of November, states, "Enemy sniper continues operations despite comprehensive countermeasures. All elevated positions within operational radius have been cleared and monitored. Shooter's location remains unidentified. Possibility of partisan activity or Allied Special Operations Unit cannot be dismissed." They were correct that it was special, but not because of elite training. It was special because it was stupid. Hargreaves was doing something so fundamentally wrong that military minds trained in proper doctrine could not process it as reality. He was proving that sometimes the most sophisticated analysis fails because it cannot account for someone willing to lie in freezing mud for 20 hours to achieve what 5 minutes of discomfort would prevent. The environmental cost continued mounting. By 26th of November, Hargreaves had developed early-stage trench foot, his toes swollen and numb. He treated this by removing his boots during breaks, massaging circulation back, then submerging himself again. He developed a persistent cough that threatened to reveal his position, which he suppressed by breathing through mud-soaked cloth, that muffled sound. His hands cracked and bled from constant wet cold. These were not sustainable conditions. They were conditions accepted as temporary price for immediate tactical advantage. British officers initially dismissed his reports as exaggerated. A captain from his battalion inspected his position on 27 November and was appalled. "Hargreaves, this is not a proper hide. You're lying in bloody mud with no concealment, no escape route, no fallback position. This violates every principle of sniper tradecraft." Hargreaves replied with Lancashire directness, "Aye, sir, that's precisely why it works. They're not looking for improper hides, they're looking for proper ones." The captain authorized him to continue operations, noting in his log, "Corporal Hargreaves employs unorthodox methods that produce results despite violating established doctrine. Recommend continued observation and medical monitoring for environmental injury." By month's end, Hargreaves had killed 63 Germans. Their counter-sniper efforts had failed completely because they were searching for a sniper and finding only mud. The mud, unfortunately for them, had learned to shoot. 3:48 hours, 3rd December 1944, German Forward Command Post, Metz Sector. Hauptscharführer Klaus Zimmermann stood before a detailed map, annotated with red markers indicating each British sniper casualty. 63 marks clustered within a 2-kilometer radius. His commander, Sturmbannführer Ernst Wolf, studied the map with visible frustration, the kind that emerges when professional competence confronts inexplicable failure. 8 days, Zimmermann. 8 days your team has operated with complete freedom to locate one British marksman. We have lost 63 men. Explain. Zimmermann chose words carefully. Herr Sturmbannführer, we have eliminated every elevated position within range. We have cleared buildings, towers, trees, rubble piles. We have monitored rooftops with continuous observation. We have established kill zones covering all conventional approach routes. The sniper continues operations as if our countermeasures do not exist. Wolf's expression hardened. Then your search is incomplete. Expand parameters. Search systematically until you find him. We have searched systematically, Herr Sturmbannführer. The problem is not incomplete search. The problem is that our search methodology presumes conventional sniper positioning. This marksman does not position conventionally. You are suggesting he operates from ground level. That is tactically absurd. Ground positions offer no elevation advantage, no cover, no escape routes. No trained sniper would accept those disadvantages. Precisely, Herr Sturmbannführer, which is why we do not find him. Wolf dismissed this reasoning as defeatist speculation. German military philosophy did not accommodate illogical tactics that succeeded through absurdity. Warfare was mathematics, physics, doctrine, variables calculated to produce predictable outcomes. The British sniper was not supernatural. He was simply hiding somewhere they had not yet searched properly. Wolf ordered intensified operations. German mortar teams saturated no man's land with harassment fire, attempting to force movement. Machine gunners swept ground-level areas with sustained fire. Artillery observers called coordinates on any suspicious terrain feature. The bombardment transformed the sector into a moonscape where nothing could survive exposure. Hargreaves survived by becoming part of the moonscape. On 4th December, after 18 hours of sustained bombardment, German infantry advanced to verify results. At 06:34 hours, their forward squad leader died from a rifle shot originating from a crater they had personally inspected and confirmed empty 2 hours earlier. The shot came from ground level, from mud that German soldiers had walked past, mud that contained a British marksman who had submerged himself beneath debris during bombardment, then emerged when infantry assumed the sector was cleared. German reports from 5 December reveal a shift in tone. An intelligence summary states, British sniper demonstrates capability to operate from positions previously confirmed clear. Conventional counter-sniper methodology proves ineffective. Request specialist assessment from Divisional Intelligence. Divisional intelligence dispatched Oberleutnant Friedrich Hartmann, an analyst trained in irregular warfare patterns observed on the Eastern Front. Hartmann had studied Soviet partisan tactics where conventional doctrine failed. He understood that desperation produces innovation, and Britain was desperate. Hartmann interviewed survivors, examined casualty patterns, studied ballistic reports. His conclusion, documented in a report dated 7th of December, was professionally phrased but deeply unsettling. Enemy sniper operates from concealment that contradicts established training. Probability assessment indicates ground-level positioning using environmental camouflage rather than structural hides. Shooter accepts physical conditions that doctrine considers operationally impossible. Recommends search parameters modified to include terrain features dismissed as tactically unsuitable. The recommendation was not immediately implemented because it required acknowledging that British ingenuity had outthought German methodology. Wehrmacht officers were trained to trust doctrine because doctrine represented centuries of accumulated military wisdom. Hartmann's suggestion implied that wisdom could be defeated by someone willing to lie in mud, a conclusion that felt less like tactical analysis and more like humiliation. But casualties continued. By 10th of December, the count reached 97. German soldiers grew nervous entering the sector, knowing an invisible marksman operated with apparent impunity. Morale deteriorated when rational countermeasures failed against an enemy who should not exist according to proper military logic. On 11 December, Zimmermann made a decision that risked his career. He would test Hartmann's hypothesis personally. At dawn, he did not search elevated positions. Instead, he crawled through no man's land at ground level, examining every crater, every rubble pile, every patch of disturbed earth that his training had taught him to ignore as tactically worthless. At 07:21 hours, 100 yards forward of British lines, he found anomalous mud. The crater looked like every other crater, destroyed earth filled with rainwater, but closer inspection revealed subtle displacement patterns inconsistent with natural settlement. Someone had moved through this position recently and attempted to disguise their passage. Zimmermann remained motionless, observing through his scope. For 40 minutes, he watched mud. Then the mud shifted slightly as the man concealed within an adjusted position to address circulation loss in cramped conditions. Zimmermann aimed at the displacement, calculating offset for concealed body position, and fired. The shot struck mud. Hargreaves, who had survived 3 weeks through absolute stillness, had moved at precisely the wrong moment. But Zimmermann's shot did not kill. It missed by centimeters because calculating body position beneath mud involved variables German training had never addressed. Hargreaves returned fire. His shot did not miss. Zimmermann died, confirming what German doctrine refused to accept. The British sniper was operating from ground level, submerged in conditions no rational military force expected trained soldiers to endure. His final report, written the previous evening and discovered after his death, stated, "British Marksman has developed methodology that renders conventional counter-sniper doctrine obsolete within his operational parameters. Defeating this tactic requires either accepting equal physical conditions or implementing comprehensive saturation bombardment that makes terrain impassable for both forces. Recommend latter option if strategic priority requires eliminating this threat." German commanders faced an unpleasant choice. They could commit resources to destroy one sniper through massive bombardment, or they could accept ongoing casualties as operationally tolerable cost. The mathematics of resource allocation suggested tolerance was cheaper than the artillery expenditure required to make no man's land genuinely impassable. They chose tolerance, which meant accepting that a single British corporal had achieved something unprecedented. He had forced Wehrmacht forces to modify tactical operations around one man's refusal to follow proper doctrine. By mid-December, German infantry avoided the sector entirely, rerouting through less efficient positions to avoid the phantom marksmen who materialized from mud whenever they grew complacent. Hargreaves continued operating, now confirmed as a tactical problem that German methodology could not solve efficiently. The question was no longer whether he could be found. Zimmermann had proven he could, but whether finding him justified the cost of searching terrain that proper military logic dismissed as impossible to defend. Sometimes the most devastating military achievement is not victory through strength, but forcing the enemy to acknowledge that their strength is irrelevant against unconventional determination. 23rd December 1944. British forward lines, Metz sector. Hargreaves lay in his 11th ground-level position, observing German withdrawal operations through morning mist. The Wehrmacht was abandoning the sector, retreating to consolidated defensive positions further east. Their withdrawal was methodical, disciplined, covered by rearguard units, but it was withdrawal nonetheless. One factor contributing to this decision, noted in captured German planning documents discovered later, was unresolved sniper situation, creating unacceptable disruption to forward operations and infantry morale. By 23rd December, Hargreaves had eliminated 114 German soldiers. The number itself was remarkable. Few snipers in any army achieved triple-digit confirmed kills, but more significant was the method. He had not outshot Germans through superior marksmanship or better equipment. He had simply hidden where German doctrine taught that hiding was impossible, then waited for targets to appear. The physical cost was severe. Hargreaves was evacuated on 24th December with advanced trench foot requiring months of recovery. His hands suffered permanent cold sensitivity. He developed chronic respiratory issues from prolonged cold water exposure. These injuries were not battlefield wounds in conventional sense. They were consequences of accepting conditions designed to defeat human endurance, sustained longer than physiology reasonably permitted. British command initially struggled to classify his achievement. Traditional metrics measured sniper effectiveness through kill counts at measured ranges under documented conditions. Hargreaves operated outside these parameters. His longest shot was 760 yards, respectable but not exceptional. His hide positions violated every doctrine taught at Bisley. His survival methodology contradicted British training as thoroughly as it had confounded German counter-snipers. Yet the results were undeniable. 114 enemy casualties, operational disruption forcing Wehrmacht tactical revision, and psychological impact that outlasted physical presence. German infantry in that sector developed lasting wariness of ground-level approaches, wasting time searching terrain they had previously considered tactically irrelevant. Major Peter Thornton, Hargreaves's battalion commander, documented the operation in his post-action report dated 28th of December. Corporal Hargreaves demonstrated that tactical innovation under desperate circumstances can achieve results disproportionate to resources employed. His methodology violated established doctrine, but proved operationally effective against enemy forces whose training precluded them from anticipating unconventional approaches. Recommend commendation and documentation as case study in adaptive warfare. Hargreaves was awarded the Military Medal, a recognition primarily for enlisted soldiers displaying exceptional courage and initiative. The citation was deliberately vague, mentioning outstanding initiative and determination in hazardous conditions without detailing specific methodology. British command remained uncertain whether to celebrate tactics that succeeded precisely because they were tactically unsound. The strategic implications extended beyond individual achievement. Military analysts studying the operation identified a fundamental vulnerability in doctrinal warfare. Comprehensive training produces soldiers who cannot process threats that fall outside trained parameters. The Germans were not incompetent. They were highly trained professionals whose training became a liability when confronting an opponent willing to abandon professionalism for effectiveness. Post-war interviews with surviving German commanders revealed their perspective. Sturmbannführer Wolf, captured in March 1945, described the Metz sniper as a problem that should not have existed according to proper military logic. Our countermeasures were correct, our search was thorough, yet the problem persisted because the British soldier had decided that proper military logic was negotiable. In January 1945, British sniper training incorporated lessons from Hargreaves' operations. Instructors now taught that effective concealment sometimes requires accepting conditions trained instinct rejects. The curriculum added modules on improvised positioning, environmental camouflage, and psychological advantages of hiding where enemies refused to search. These lessons proved valuable in subsequent operations where British forces faced numerically superior opponents with superior equipment. Situations requiring innovation rather than conventional excellence. Hargreaves himself returned to civilian life in 1946, resuming work in Lancashire factories that had survived war intact. He rarely discussed his service, partly from natural reticence, partly because explaining that he had killed over 100 men by lying in mud for weeks felt less like military achievement and more like admission of temporary insanity. Years later, in 1963, a historian researching British sniper operations located Hargreaves and requested an interview. The historian asked what tactical insight had led him to develop his ground-level methodology. Hargreaves's response was characteristically understated. "It weren't tactical insight, lad. It were just understanding that when you can't win by being better, you win by being where they're not looking. Germans looked up because that's where snipers belong. I stayed down because that's where snipers don't belong. Sometimes the cleverest thing you can do is the stupidest thing nobody expects." The historian pressed, "But the physical conditions, lying in freezing water for days, the hypothermia risk, the complete lack of comfort, how did you endure it? Same way men endured factories during Blitz. Same way women endured queues during rationing. Same way Britain endured when everyone said we'd fall. You endure because giving up means they win, and we don't let them win. Not complicated, just British." That determination, more than marksmanship or tactical brilliance, defined Hargreaves's achievement. He proved that warfare is ultimately psychological. The side that refuses to quit under conditions the enemy considers unbearable gains advantage that superior equipment cannot overcome. By war's end, military historians estimated Hargreaves' operations in December 1944 had disrupted German defensive cohesion across a 2-kilometer sector, contributing to accelerated Allied advance that liberated Metz ahead of projected schedules. One man, one rifle, and the willingness to lie in mud had achieved results that conventional infantry assaults would have required casualties measured in hundreds. The final count of confirmed kills reached 137, though Hargreaves maintained the number was probably higher because you don't always see them fall, you just see them stop moving. German casualty records captured post-war confirmed at least 114 deaths attributable to unidentified sniper Metz sector, November-December 1944. Thomas Hargreaves died in 1987, aged 67, from complications related to respiratory illness, traced to wartime cold exposure. His obituary in the Lancashire Telegraph mentioned his military medal, but provided no details. Few mourners at his funeral knew that the quiet factory worker had once been a ghost that killed from mud, a phantom who forced the Wehrmacht to fear the ground they walked on. His legacy persists in military doctrine. Sometimes the most effective tactic is the one that defies all tactical logic, implemented by someone too stubborn to accept that impossible means unachievable. The British have a phrase for this mindset, often applied with dry irony, but occasionally with genuine respect: bloody-minded determination. Hargreaves embodied it completely. He proved that when empires clash with doctrines refined through centuries, occasionally a factory worker from Lancashire who refuses to follow rules can disrupt the entire system. Not through brilliance, but through the simple refusal to accept that lying in freezing mud for 3 weeks is an unreasonable price for victory. In a nation defined by enduring what others consider unendurable, Thomas Hargreaves became the accidental exemplar of British stubbornness applied as military strategy. The mud, in the end, had proven deadlier than steel. If this extraordinary story of British determination against impossible odds resonated with you, subscribe to our channel for more untold stories from the Second World War. These are the accounts that textbooks overlook: the ingenuity, the resilience, and the bloody-minded refusal to surrender that defined Britain's finest hour. Share this story with anyone who believes that courage sometimes means lying in freezing mud for weeks, because giving up simply isn't an option. Leave a comment. What other unsung British heroes from the war should we cover next? Your suggestions shape our content.